Okay, Sean, thanks very much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to the conversation, Kevin.
And always with conversations about education and technology and future thoughts, there are always acronyms involved, right? I mean, over the years, we can't escape it in the education space. In this case, we're talking CBE. Maybe we could start off by you talking a little bit about what that means for you and for McGraw Hill, and talk a little bit about the districts that you know that are working to implement this sort of innovative instructional model.
Yeah, we say it's innovative, but it's really been around for decades. So there have always been examples of competency-based education programs happening in school districts all around the country. It's just not something that has been systemically adopted. So we've seen it in LA Unified, we've seen it in Miami, and it really depends on the will of local leadership to implement these programs with fidelity for a target population in most cases.
And so dig into the weeds a little bit. What does it mean, right? I mean, it's certainly kind of a big picture. There's a big picture aspect to it, but like, what does it mean when you kind of boots on the ground, the day to day for an educator or for an administrator as they're trying to improve teaching and learning in their district?
Well, it's really a massive paradigm shift. And the paradigm that we're used to is where you have a rigid scope and sequence over a fixed period of time. And so, what we're actually trying to implement with our partner school districts who are implementing competency-based education is where that time is not fixed, but the outcome is fixed. And we're making sure that students demonstrate competency at the skill level before they advance to the next skill. And this can be done through a variety of ways. It could be done in a traditional learning environment. It can be done with project-based learning. But the key thing here is flexibility and making sure that students have a personalized pathway, an engaging personalized pathway in which they can demonstrate the acquired competency or skill.
Right. And as you said, districts have been pursuing these sort of models in pockets for a long time, but there from my perspective, yet to see this kind of national transformation, right? Or just kind of a zeitgeist to the movement of that. For those districts who are beginning to attempt these transformations, what are the kind of the elements that you see that drive the success?
Well, the first thing that you have to do is decide what competencies you want your students to acquire. There is no national set of competencies for a particular domain or for a particular grade level. And so that's essentially left up to the states or left up to the local education agency. Then you have to obviously create a personalized pathway for each student so that they can demonstrate those competencies. And that demonstration of competency is going to require some form of assessment, some form of observation is going to be incredibly important. And while students are going through a competency-based educational opportunity, you want to make sure that they get continuous feedback. That's also going to be vitally important. And then lastly, there have to be flexible learning environments. And so you have to group students, regroup students, continuous assessment, and regroup students again. The prevailing paradigm, as I discussed earlier, also is really focused on one key variable for all of these students, and they're grouped this way, and that's the year of their birth. So there is a lot of inertia behind taking a cohort of students who happen to be the same age and moving them through that rigid scope and sequence. That's what we're trying to overcome with competency-based education.
Interesting. And again, back to the acronyms, the one that beats CBE for the past couple of years, and I think the years coming up is AI, right? Has certainly invaded education as well as every other aspect of our lives. What role does AI and even more kind of back into the history, data and data driven instruction is another kind of phrase that we always hear in education. How do these technologies affect these models?
Well, of course, we're still really trying to figure this out. It's still relatively new. It's entered, to use your word, the zeitgeist only recently. A lot of teachers are using generative AI to create lessons the day before they have to actually teach. One thing that we know almost universally for teachers from coast to coast is that they are exceptionally time poor. They don't have enough time to prepare or analyze the data as much as they would like. So generative AI can be used to generate content for students, personalized content as well, It can also be used for data interpretation. In essence, the technology, all of it, the computational power, as well as broadband access and the near ubiquitous access to devices, puts us now in a position to essentially outsource that labor-intensive sorting and grouping to the technology so that the computational, logistic, and administrative burden is something that teachers don't have to add to their already complex workday in which they have far too many things that they need to do and not enough time to do it.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the burden on teachers and administrators and districts in terms of the responsibility, and it just seems to get tougher every day for them when it comes to that. Talk a little bit about the responsibility on the industry side, where McGraw Hill sits, and other companies. What role, what responsibilities do education companies play in making this transformation successful? I mean, how do you, as a company, help create conditions for this student-centered, personalized learning experience that you just described?
Kevin, we're all in this together. We all have a vested interest in seeing our students perform better. I happen to live just outside of Washington, D.C. Yesterday, I was able to attend the Senate hearings for the confirmation of the nominee for the Secretary of Education. And regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on, everyone wants to see our students do better. And so there are various ways to go about that, but no one should be trying to do this alone, either as a member of the administration or a practitioner or on the vendor side, the commercial side, where McGraw Hill sits. I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that our entire corpus of content, of learning materials, whether print or digital, can be made available to any student at any grade level, not just sixth grade content assigned to a sixth grade student. The other thing that I think is really important, in addition to providing high quality instructional resources, is that our technology should actually add something. It should add time, ideally, because time is the flexible variable that we're talking about with competency-based education. So if our systems are not engaging, easy to use, even if they have the greatest content in the world, it's not going to be something that adds to the teacher's toolkit. Instead, it's going to be a source of frustration. And as you mentioned, being a teacher, and this was actually mentioned in the hearing yesterday, it's getting harder and harder to be a teacher in this complex environment. I mean, we have other issues besides learning. We have increases in student poverty. We have increases in absenteeism. We know about the violence in schools that is happening all too frequently, a national shame in many ways. In this environment, teachers are expected to overcome the effects of pandemic represented in learning loss. So it's very tough. So we have to be there aiding the teacher in this complex, large-scale endeavor.
Well, Sean, again, I really do appreciate your time and your insights. As difficult as a time it is for students in districts, it's your work and the work of those districts that are making things better for our kids today. So thanks again.
It's our pleasure. This is work worth doing. The future is waiting for us, and we are ready to adapt the model as soon as any location is ready to take on a new paradigm and try to implement competency-based education. Thank you very much, Kevin.